Well, let's take visual perception, which yes, relatively uncontroversial. And take the one example that I gave, the rigidity principle. Okay, when you're looking at that sequence of tachistoscopic presentations, you perceive a rigid object in motion. You can't prevent yourself from perceiving that. That's what you perceive, period. What you're actually, the stimuli that are actually reaching your eyes, your retina, are just a series of as few as 3 or 4 presentations on a tachistoscope, a screen with lights, of each of which has several dots on it. Well, you have no way of introspecting into that. Your phenomenal experience is a rigid object in motion, but the stimuli that are hitting the retina are a very small number of presentations of a few dots. You can't introspect into that. In fact, that's why it's a discovery. It's kind of like the discovery of the chemical structure of coal or something. You can't introspect into it. So the phenomenal descriptions, they're useful, but they're useful as data. They tell you very little about what's going on. So it's kind of like everything else in the world, where you have data, but it doesn't tell you much about what's going on. That's why you have to take courses in physics and chemistry and so on, because the data isn't transparent. And it's hard for people to deal with. But the same is true of our conscious lives. I mean, we tend to take for granted, kind of like, it's just normal, that we can understand everything about ourselves. In fact, we don't understand anything about ourselves. It's even harder than understanding how chemistry works, because it's so much more complex. And that's the crucial step that the human sciences really have not taken yet, for the most part, that was taken in the natural sciences around the 17th century. Just the willingness to be puzzled about things that look obvious. Like, what could be more obvious than if I let go of a cup, it goes down instead of up? Well, Galileo was willing to be puzzled about that. That's why you take physics courses. Before that, all you had to be told is things are going to their natural place. And it's a big psychological step, even in studying the external world, even greater in studying ourselves, because there we sort of feel that we know everything. What's conscious must be what there is. And in philosophy, modern philosophy, it's kind of a principle. It happened to be John Searle, who I was quoting, but it's a widely accepted principle that nothing can be a mental process unless it's accessible to consciousness. And as I mentioned, if you look over the intellectual history, it's very hard to find anyone who departed from this view.
Okay, we'll take time for one more question because it's getting late. And someone over here had raised their hand.
Yes, Professor. You mentioned the problems behind the referential dogma. Would you say that we are in a, if we reject that, are we in a situation that Quine maybe puts us in with the... Sorry, are we in a situation similar to Quine's indeterminacy of translation? Would you say that's where we're left?
Well, Quine accepted the dogma, but that's not surprising because almost everybody does today too. His idea, his doctrine of indeterminacy was in fact based on assuming this. So if you take his framework that there's nothing but association and conditioning, how do you know, to take his example, when you hear a word, let's say rabbit is his case, when a child hears the word rabbit, how does it know that the word is referring to that animal running around? Sorry, and not to some part of the animal? Because if you see the animal running around, its leg is also running around. So how does the child know that it's not the leg? You know? And how does it not know, in fact, that the word doesn't refer to some disconnected object, like the leg of this one and the head of another one, and so on? That's a standard problem of induction. It's Hume's problem of induction. And as Hume understood, but his successors don't seem to understand, there's no way to solve that problem. Hume himself, contrary to what you may learn in a philosophy course, was a rationalist, not an empiricist. He took for granted and says that the only way you can solve the problem of induction is by what he calls an animal instinct. It means there must be some internal structure in your mind that leads you to a particular answer, because there's no way to get it by induction. And that, I think, is correct. And I think the same would be true about Quine's galagai, rabbit. The child gets the right answer because they're built to get the right answer. And the right answer is not in the case of, say, rabbit, you can easily show that what a child understands to be a rabbit is not something physically identifiable. I'm kind of guessing your ages, but say my grandchildren, probably about your age, when they were kids, there's a story that they liked about a baby donkey named Sylvester. And so some of you know, the baby donkey somehow is turned into a rock. And for the rest of the story, it's trying to convince its parents that it's not a rock, it's their baby donkey. And since children's stories always end happily, something happens and it ends up and it's a baby donkey again and everybody's happy. But the interesting fact is that every child understands that that thing that has all the physical properties of a rock is in fact Sylvester. And the reason is, and this was in fact noticed by John Locke, that people, and in fact animals, are individuated by properties like psychic continuity. Okay, you're the same if there's some psychic continuity no matter how you change physically. I mean, that's the standard fairy tale. You know, the evil witch turns the handsome prince into a frog, and he has all the properties of a frog until the beautiful princess comes and kisses the frog. Then he's the handsome witch again, handsome prince again. Well, again, every kid knows that it's always the prince because it has the property of psychic continuity. Actually, a lot of science fiction is based on this, but it's even true of the children's stories. Well, that alone tells you right away that what individuates objects is not a collection of physical properties, but some complex mental structure that we impose on them, like psychic continuity. And Hume didn't think about that. Locke, in fact, did. But I should say Hume recognized that it was true, that we don't identify words by physical properties. But it runs across the whole collection of words. You can't find a word so simple that it doesn't have those properties. Actually, in the natural sciences, what you try to do is to concoct, you invent concepts which do have those properties. So when you invent the concept, say, electron or something, you intend it to be physically identifiable. You don't want it to have its meaning changed by what's in your head. That's the whole point. So it's a kind of a norm for the sciences, but it's just not true of human language. And that goes back to Quine's example. The solution to his problem is essentially Hume's solution to the problem of induction. No solution, except you're built to pick things up, to structure the world in a certain way. So that's the way you do it.